In 2024, a guy named Matthew Gallagher launched a telehealth company called Medvi from his home with just $20,000 and a handful of AI tools. In its first year, it did $401 million in revenue, and the only person he ever hired was his brother. His closest competitor pulls in $2.4 billion a year with over 2,400 employees, but Gallagher's profit margin is 3 times higher. And that's because he treats AI like a full team instead of a side assistant. Now that's the billion-dollar version. But the same pattern is playing out at smaller scales, with people right now making 6 figures a month running solo businesses that look like they have 20 employees, and none of them are talking about how they're doing it. I spent the last month figuring out what they all have in common, and it comes down to how they use Claude, not just as a chatbot, but as something that handles their research, proposals, content, and admin, while they just focus on clients. So in this video, I'm going to break down the full system step by step, show you how to set it up from scratch, and by the end, you'll have the exact same setup these people are using to outpace agencies with hundreds of employees. This isn't a video about building an app or writing code. This is about taking the business functions that eat up most of your time: the research, the proposals, the content, the emails, the admin, and handing all of that to Claude so you can focus on the 2 things that actually make you money, strategy, and client relationships. The way I think about it is simple. You are the person who decides what to work on, who to work with, and what direction the business goes. Claude is the person who does the writing, the research, the drafting, and the repetitive tasks that would normally take you hours every week. Now, the reason I use Claude specifically, and not any other AI model, is that Claude handles long, detailed instructions better than anything else I've tested. When I paste in a 2,000-word set of client notes and ask it to write a proposal, it doesn't lose context halfway through or start making things up. And when I feed it with my writing style guide, it actually sticks to it across sessions instead of drifting back to a generic tone. For the kind of work I'm about to show you, where you're giving the AI a lot of context and expecting it to produce something you can actually send to a client, that consistency matters more than speed or flashiness. When you set this up properly, your output doubles without your hours increasing. And from the outside, it looks like you have a team behind you. And the entire system runs through Claude's chat interface, which means you don't need to know how to code, you don't need any technical background, and everything happens in the same window you're probably already familiar with. If you can describe what you want in plain English, you can run this system. Now, I think of this system as 5 core functions, and I call them functions because each one handles a specific part of your business the same way a team member would. I've given each one a name based on what it actually does, and I'm going to walk you through all 5 of them, starting with the function that saves you the most time before you even have a single client. The biggest mistake people make when starting a service business is guessing what people want instead of looking at what they're already complaining about. Claude is extremely good at taking a pile of messy information and pulling out the patterns that matter. I go to the review pages of my competitors on sites like G2 or Trustpilot, and I copy the reviews that are rated 3 stars and below. I paste those into Claude, and I ask it to find the 3 most common complaints across all of these reviews and tell me what people are paying for but not getting. Within about 30 seconds, Claude gives me a breakdown of the exact gaps in the market, written in the exact language that real customers are using to describe their frustration. That language is incredibly valuable, because when you use the same words your customers use to describe their own problem, your marketing immediately sounds like you understand them. I also use Claude to analyze pricing. I'll paste in screenshots or text from 3 or 4 competitor pricing pages and ask Claude to compare the tiers, identify what's missing from the cheapest plans, and tell me where there's room to position a service that fills a specific gap. The whole research phase used to take me a week of browsing forums, reading reviews, and comparing spreadsheets, and now it's a 2-hour Claude session where I walk away with a validated direction, competitive gaps, and the exact words my future clients use to describe their pain. Now, once you know what the market wants and what's missing, the next step is packaging what you do into something that feels worth paying for. A lot of people who are good at what they do struggle to explain it in a way that makes someone want to pay for it. They either list their skills like a resume, or they describe their service so broadly that it sounds like everyone else. This is where my previous research pays off, because I already know what the market wants, and now I just need Claude to help me package my skills around that gap. I tell Claude what my skills are, what kind of clients I want to work with, what results I've gotten in the past, and roughly what I want to charge. Then I ask it to create 3 pricing tiers for my service: a starter, a standard, and a premium, with clear deliverables for each one, and to position the middle tier as the obvious best choice. Claude comes back with a full pricing structure that includes what's in each tier, what makes each one different, and even suggested names for each package. The first draft is never perfect, but it gives me a starting point that's 10 times better than if I would have just written this on my own, and I can refine it by telling Claude what to adjust. What surprised me was how well Claude handles the positioning language, because it pulls from the customer complaints I fed it earlier and frames each tier as a direct answer to a specific problem. So the starter tier addresses the most basic pain point, the standard tier covers the full solution, and the premium adds the hands-on support that the competitor reviews said was missing. I also ask it to write a one-paragraph description of my service that I can paste into my website, my LinkedIn, and my proposals, and it nails the tone because I've already fed it the customer language from the research phase. The whole process takes about 20 minutes, and by the end, I have a pricing page, a service description, and a clear way to explain what I do, which is something a lot of people spend weeks trying to figure out on their own. Now you have your offer, you know your market, and you need clients, which means you need to be visible, and that's where most solo businesses stall out. The reason most one-person businesses struggle to grow is that nobody knows they exist. And the reason nobody knows they exist is that the person running the business is too busy doing client work to create any content, so they stay invisible. Claude fixes this because it turns the work you're already doing into content, without you having to sit down and write from scratch. At the end of the week, I open Claude and I dump in everything, the wins, the losses, and any client conversations that mattered. Then I ask Claude to turn those notes into 3 short social media posts and 1 longer post, all written in a casual first-person tone that sounds like I'm talking to a friend. The first time I did this, I had to adjust the tone a few times because Claude defaulted to something that sounded too polished, but after feeding it into adjustments, it locked into my voice, and now the drafts are close to ready on the first try. I take the posts and paste them across social media throughout the week. The content also gets better over time because Claude starts recognizing which topics and angles I tend to approve and which ones I rewrite, so the drafts slowly get closer to what I'd write myself. And once you're posting consistently, it compounds fast, because after a few weeks of consistent posting, people start reaching out, and when they do, you need to be ready with a proposal that makes them say yes. This is the part that used to take me the longest, because every proposal felt like it had to be written from scratch, and I'd spend hours trying to make it sound professional without being generic. Now I use Claude to write every proposal, and the quality is higher than what I used to produce on my own, because Claude doesn't hesitate or overthink the way I do. After a call with a potential client, I take my notes from the call, the things they mentioned they need, the problems they described, the budget they hinted at, and I paste all of that into Claude. Then I ask it to write a proposal that addresses each of their pain points specifically, includes a recommended solution with a timeline, and structures the pricing using the tiers I already created in the offer phase. Within about 2 minutes, Claude gives me a full proposal that speaks directly to the client's business because it uses the exact problems they described in the call and maps my service directly to each one. I review it, make sure everything is accurate, adjust the pricing if needed, and then I send it. The whole process from call to sent proposal is under 30 minutes now, and I used to block out an entire afternoon for this. And the response rate is noticeably better than when I was writing proposals manually, because Claude picks up on everything in the notes and weaves it into the solution without skipping a single detail. One thing I started doing recently is feeding Claude a few examples of proposals that won me clients in the past, so it learns what my successful proposals look like and applies that structure to new ones. After doing this, the drafts got even closer to what I'd send without edits. I also use Claude for follow-up emails. If a client hasn't responded in a few days, I paste in the original proposal and ask Claude to write a short, friendly follow-up that references something specific from our conversation and reminds them of the timeline without being pushy. That kind of personalized follow-up used to feel awkward and time-consuming, and now it takes about 30 seconds. Now you've got clients, you're delivering work, you're creating content, and the business is moving. But there's one more layer that almost everyone ignores, and it quietly eats hours every single week. Nobody starts a business because they love writing onboarding documents, follow-up sequences, or standard operating procedures. But the moment you have more than 2 clients, the admin starts piling up, and if you don't systemize it, you end up spending half your week on things that don't generate any revenue. Claude handles all of this. When I onboard a new client, I paste in the project scope and ask Claude to generate an onboarding checklist that includes everything the client needs to send me, the timeline for each deliverable, and a welcome message I can send them on day 1. It takes about 60 seconds, and now every client gets the same professional onboarding experience without me rewriting the same email for the 10th time. I also use Claude to build SOPs for recurring tasks. If there's something I do every week, like updating a client dashboard, sending a weekly report, or reviewing campaign performance, I describe the process to Claude once and ask it to write a step-by-step SOP that anyone could follow. I did this for my weekly client reporting process, and the SOP Claude wrote was so clear that when I eventually brought on a part-time contractor, I just sent them the document, and they were able to handle the reports without a single call from me to explain anything. This matters because if you ever want to bring on a contractor or hand off a task, the documentation is already done, and you didn't spend hours writing it yourself. Even the small stuff adds up, like invoice reminder emails, meeting recap summaries, and project wrap-up messages. And Claude handles all of it in the time it takes me to paste in the context and hit enter. And once all of that admin is handled, something changes, because you stop thinking about your business in terms of individual tasks and start seeing how every part feeds into every other part. When I first started using Claude for individual tasks, the time savings were nice, but not life-changing. The moment it became a different experience entirely was when I connected all 5 functions into a single daily rhythm. In the morning, I spend about 20 minutes with Claude reviewing what happened the previous day, checking if any proposals need follow-ups, and drafting the week's content from my notes. By the time I start my actual work, I already have social media posts queued, follow-up emails ready to send, and a clear picture of what needs my attention. During the day, I focus entirely on client work and calls because the research, the writing, and the admin are already handled. If a discovery call comes in, I take notes during the call, paste them into Claude after, and have a proposal ready to send before the end of the day. If a client asks for an onboarding document or a project timeline, I generate it in 60 seconds instead of blocking out an hour for it. At the end of the day, I dump my notes into Claude and it drafts the next day's content, sends me any follow-up emails I need to review, and flags anything that needs attention tomorrow. By the end of the week, I've published 4 pieces of content, sent out 2 to 3 proposals, onboarded any new clients, and handled all the admin, and the total time I spent on those tasks combined is maybe 4 to 5 hours. The rest of my time went to the work itself and the relationships that bring in more of it. That's the system. And the longer you run it, the more it compounds, because Claude gets better at matching your tone, your proposals get more refined, your content gets more consistent, and your operations get tighter every week. And none of this required hiring anyone, subscribing to a marketing tool, or learning a new platform. And the moment all 5 functions started running together, my weeks went from feeling scattered to feeling like I had a system behind me, and that shift is what let me take on more clients without working more hours. If you want to see another AI tool that can stack with this kind of setup, I made a full breakdown of 7 ways to start a business with Notebook LM right here. Hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.